We have all seen posts of men not understanding women's anatomy. How have you experienced this the other way? For instance, my wife confidently told me that men who engage in self-pleasure a lot actually stretch the skin of their penises permanently. If that were the case, mine would be looped around my waist. Yes, I am aware of the technique of stretching, it doesn't work. That is not what she was referencing. Story 1. I got into a full-blown fight with my ex one time because she was adamant that sperm came from the prostate and not the testicles. Even after searching it online, she didn't believe me. Weirdest fight ever. Story 2. I was dating this girl for 2 months at this point, and we had sex multiple times. We were watching a show, and she told me she was glad I was circumcised since foreskins are weird. It turns out she had no idea that a foreskin retracts during sex and thus thought I was circumcised. I am not. Story 3. My ex-girlfriend accused me of overreacting because of the man flu. Turns out I was passing a kidney stone. I had to drive her and myself to the hospital and have a computed tomography scan to prove it to her. But the change in attitude and apologies were worth it. Story 4. Had the dumbest argument with my mom when I was a teenager. I was 17 and had been lifting for around 6 months. She got mad at me because she thought I was skipping out on the gym or wasn't trying hard enough. I asked her why she thought that, and she said, "You don't have big muscles. If you really went every day like you said, you'd have big muscles." I was completely baffled. I hadn't done any sports prior to lifting except swimming, and my lifestyle until that point was very sedentary. I asked her how she expected me to look, and she showed me a picture of an under-18 national basketball athlete. She basically thought that guys just had to lift weights for a little while to look like an under-18 national athlete who had trained and worked out from the age of 6 or something. Summary. Mom thought all guys just had to lift a little for about 6 months to look like Taylor Lautner from Twilight and got mad when I, an unfit nerd at the time, didn't look like him after 6 months in the gym. Story 5. Nothing personal, just online stuff. Stuff like erection equals turned on, erection being binary, pre-ejaculate not containing any sperm and us having full control over it at all times. Story 6. I once had a girlfriend who thought urine was stored in the testicles. She insisted on holding my testicles while I urinated. Weirdest experience ever. Then I had to explain to her that it is not enjoyable trying to urinate with an erection. Story 7. I've been kind of surprised at how ignorant and unfriendly women are towards the concept of declining testosterone, a natural phenomenon in men. They seem to think that testosterone replacement therapy is an easy, consequence-free thing that can be done if a woman thinks her man isn't active or sexy enough for her. Story 8. Quite often, a lot of women assume I can just get hard at a moment's notice. Also, the complete lack of awareness during sex. Tugging on my penis extremely hard or playing with my testicles like they're not extremely sensitive. For how often I hear women criticize men for being bad at sex. It's astonishing how hypocritical they are. Story 9. Most women do not know that the sac has a mind of its own and moves independently. We have no control over it, but it will just move around in all sorts of ways. Story 10. Lots of women operate under the impression that going to the gym twice a week and occasionally drinking a protein shake suffices for a man to get jacked or ripped. Women like this love the muscles but hate the diet and lifestyle needed to build or maintain them. Story 11. Every woman who is sharply fixated on the height their man should be, the ones who obsess with numbers such as 6 feet 2 inches, 6 feet 4 inches, 6 feet 5 inches, and so on, don't know how tall that height really is. Story 12. Women online stretching condoms over bone and muscle as though they are adequate analogs for a blood sac, penis, and confidently proclaiming this proves condom size is irrelevant. Story 13. I have not experienced anything personally, but one thing that comes to mind is that many women seem to think that men's genitals are located further down between the legs. Conversely, men often have the misconception that women's vaginas are higher up than they actually are. Many men believe the vaginal opening is much higher, rather than lower, as it is. Story 14. A lot of women seem to think that every erection a man gets is due to sexual arousal, and some have been surprised when I told them that isn't the case. I wake up with about 5 erections every night, and they aren't sexual at all. They're annoying. I wish more women knew that just because a man has an erection doesn't mean he's aroused. Story 15. A good one I've seen pop up online a few times is that men have complete control over when they ejaculate. Therefore, if a guy doesn't last long enough in bed, it's because he's selfish. Story 16. I once had my lesbian friend's extremely misandrous girlfriend insist that men everywhere just spontaneously get erections every morning and afternoon, twice a day, like clockwork. She had read something about circadian rhythms, and what stuck with her was that men tend to get erect more easily when they are sleepy, also known as in the morning wood, and in the afternoon when most people would like to take a nap. I explained to her that while it's true that many men probably are more likely to experience an erection or arousal at those times, it was certainly not true that every man, nor even a majority, would spontaneously get an erection every time they yawned. She told me, basically, that I was wrong and needed to do more research. I said my research was between my legs. She also once told me, the proud holder of a bachelor's degree in culinary arts, that I was using the wrong type of avocado for guacamole. She was a confusing person. Story 17. Had an emergency department doctor punch an indwelling catheter through the urethral opening to the point it basically tore his head in two and slid between the skin and his meat instead of down the urethra. Someone got yelled at that day. Story 18. Had an ex ask me if she could hold it when I took a leak. She instantly started pulling on it in rough, jerking motions because she thought we peed like you milk a cow. Note, it was not pleasurable jerking motions. Story 19. My testicles had a dull pain for quite a while, and I was getting worried. I spoke to my girlfriend about it, and she admitted that she had been inspecting my testicles while I was asleep as she was interested in them and had never had the opportunity to observe them up close before. Does that count? Story 20. My wife cannot understand the sensitivity of testicles. I have taken some pretty bad shots to the groin from the kids, all on accident, of course, and she just can't wrap her head around my reaction. She also doesn't understand how I can wipe back to front without getting anything on my balls. I've tried to explain to her I'm not dragging the toilet paper up the taint, but as a woman, I guess the process is just too foreign to her. Story 21. The main one is definitely that most women think we walk around with instant erections ready to go at a second's notice. Nope, I need to be aroused, same as you. Story 22. My girlfriend was baffled at how I don't have anything on my balls after using the bathroom. She was also baffled by how I can wipe from the front. Also, when she tried to stimulate me, she would often miss the base. Like, she would bend the bottom of my penis and move it upwards from there, as if it were some sort of coiled snake. And she was confused when I told her that it was uncomfortable. Story 23. Dry hand jobs and blow jobs with teeth are no-nos. I'm not sure why this is hard for women to understand. In many cases, especially when we get older, we are no longer horny after we ejaculate, and there's nothing they can do to change that. Nature has to take its course. Story 24. I was once married to a woman who had a doctorate-level medical field degree and did not understand that only men have prostates and what prostates do. Story 25. My mother-in-law had to ask, when you sit on the toilet, where do your bits go? At a family function with many male attendants. I think another time would include all the mothers who opted for circumcision as a hygienic choice for their sons. Story 26. When my husband and I were dating, I absolutely fell apart because he didn't get aroused while making out with me. Keep in mind he was my second boyfriend, and I had just lost my virginity the prior year after thinking I was a lesbian. I had no need to worry about men's anatomy because I never wanted anything to do with it. The look on his face as I sobbed because he wasn't attracted to me enough to get aroused from just kissing me. He was like, that's not always how it works. How many people have you been with? Me, one, but I've been with a couple of others. Yeah, that's not how any of this works, sweetie. Story 27. Some woman, I don't remember who, said that my anus would become permanently gaping if I kept having sex anally. That always bothered me. But upon looking it up, no, it does not become permanently gaping. Story 28. One that always gets me is, your nipples are hard, so you must be turned on by this. I can sort of understand the confusion with the penis, also not true but more forgivable. But nipples? If anything, they get hard from discomfort or irritation. Story 29. I had been talking to someone, never had a physical relationship, but the subject of circumcision came up. She tried telling me that men who were uncircumcised were dirty because the skin doesn't come back far enough to clean it. I was like, well, I'm uncircumcised and have never had an issue cleaning it. Story 30. Literally every conversation I've had with women in the United States about non-consensual circumcision. The babies don't feel it. It doesn't affect anything. Those aren't scars, it's normal. Story 31. A woman once argued with me that it's impossible for me to urinate with an erection and simply refused to accept that we can, in fact. Otherwise, a lot of women don't understand that our testicles feel like their private parts do. Had a girl decide to just hit them one time while we were getting frisky. Narrator, it was not hot. Story 32. Slamming down at full speed in the wrong way, squeezing and pulling on my testicles, thinking it feels good, and licking my nipple, like that doesn't do for me what it does for you. Story 33. I've posted this story before, but my ex, whom I was with, had read an article in Cosmopolitan that told her to pinch the seam of my testicles while having sex for a mind-blowing experience. The only mind-blowing part of that act is that anyone thinks it would actually feel good. Story 34. The girl in high school told me and our other male friends that we should stop getting erections all the time. We told her it's involuntary, but she thought we were lying until we showed her on the computer. Story 35. Woman here, but I just want to tell a story about my ex. He had phimosis, which means his foreskin was tight over his head and could not be retracted. The girl he was with before me didn't understand this or listen and ended up pulling it down very roughly, causing him to tear. After that, and months of healing, I'm sure you can imagine he was a little timid to be intimate with anyone. I'm glad he told me about his fears. I'm always very gentle, but I was especially careful because I knew he was scared. I was also very apprehensive as I had never had good sex with a man, to the point that I was starting to think I was gay, but fortunately we were very sexually compatible. He took care of me and I took care of him. We had complete trust in each other, and that's what makes for good sex. Story 36. Most women don't understand how amazingly complex male sexual anatomy really is. Story 37. A full-grown woman with a child told me my penis gets bigger every time I masturbate. I replied that I must have the biggest penis in the world. Spoiler alert, I don't. Story 38. As a gay man, luckily my partners have penis and balls of their own, so these answers are hilarious and make me wince, but luckily I haven't experienced it in person. Story 39. Yeah, women just assume guys can and should always be in the mood for sexy time. That's not the case at all. We deal with stress, anxiety, being tired, and sometimes just not in the mood too. Story 40. One of my more serious girlfriends in college told me one evening that she gives great oral sex. We had only been dating for a couple of weeks and hadn't been intimate yet. This was before hookup culture and I like taking it slow. I asked her how she had come to that assessment of her skills, and she just gave me a coy smile. So I said, cool, care to demonstrate? She did, and I'm reasonably sure she had never done that act ever before. So many teeth. Story 41. I have a couple of stories to share. Firstly, my last girlfriend was quite invested in left-wing talking points. Not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but I'm generally a middle ground kind of person. Once, I made an offhand comment about men being naturally stronger, and she reacted very angrily. She called me sexist and misogynistic, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was surprised she wasn't aware that testosterone gives men more upper body strength and helps us develop muscle and bone density better than women. She then brought up the argument that if a woman trains hard, which I didn't even disagree with. I said, look, I'm not saying that I, being out of shape, can beat up Ronda Rousey, but on average, if a man and a woman have the same amount of training, the man is going to be stronger. She remained upset with me the entire evening, even after checking online and finding out I was right. The worst part? This woman was a nurse. We were both around 45 at the time. The second story is sex-related, so if that kind of thing triggers you, skip ahead. Another young lady I dated in my early 30s believed that any contact with the male anatomy must feel good. She assumed that, as a man, I must be thrilled when she grabbed me. No, I was not thrilled at all because she gripped it as if she wanted to take it with her. I eventually had to talk to her about it because it was making me dislike sex. I explained to her that she wouldn't feel very good if I used a comb on her private parts. Sure, it's long and hard, but it would be abrasive and painful. Well, that's what her technique felt like with the rough grabbing. Eventually, we got into a good rhythm. Story 42. An old girlfriend once noticed I was erect, and she insisted we have sex because if I don't climax after having an erection, I could die. She was totally serious. Story 43. My wife thinks that you have to urinate to make your morning erection go down. I had to explain to her that you need to lose the erection first, then you can urinate, not always an easy feat. A great example of correlation does not equal causation. Story 44. Majority of women's knowledge of foreskin and intact men is inadequate. I literally had an ex who told me after our first time together she called her nurse friend to find out what to do. Also, a large number of women do not realize the physical difference between the strength and speed of men and women. Story 45. It is very possible for men to have a penis that is incorrectly attached too closely by the skin on the bottom of the head. This generally corrects itself during puberty, but not always. If it doesn't, then you will likely tear your penis during intercourse until it reaches the correct length. Nobody told me this in school. I had to search for it myself after experiencing issues as an adult. It's like home surgery. Just wait for it to heal and tear again until it stops tearing. I'm so glad it's over.